Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Sunday, July 16th, 2017, and it's 12 p.m. How is everybody doing? I know it's been a minute since I've done these podcasts, especially my individual podcasts. And I've just been, kind of going over things in my head, and people have been asking me a lot of questions or making, observations. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to set the record straight on a few things. And to do that, I need to literally start from the beginning, my beginnings. I rarely, a lot of times I might use myself as an example to a topic, but I don't really talk about me as the individual. I talk about me in the hypothetical sense. But I think once you hear a little bit about what's going on, in my life and what's gone on in my life, you may be able to relate what's going on now, if that makes sense, and how I live my life and how I do things. So let's start from the beginning, and I think what I'm going to do is periodically I'll do a podcast and I'll talk a little bit about something within a segment of my life that you can kind of relate to it in terms of what I do now and why I'm the way I am now. So let's start from the beginning. Both my parents, one comes from North Carolina, my dad, one of 5 children. My mother, one of 6 children and the only girl. So that means a lot. My father he started out as the second youngest, and then he ended up being the third youngest because my grandfather remarried after my grandmother passed away. So my mom technically was an only child because she was the only girl. She had 5 brothers, born in Harlem and raised in Harlem. So she was, a tough cookie. She had brothers. She was the second oldest, and she went through high school until the age of 16, dropped out, moved out, got an apartment, got a job, and pretty much everything she learned, she was self-taught. So she was a magnificent artist, and she also was an excellent bookkeeper. She knew her numbers. Hence my relationship with math. Both my parents were very good in math. So even though I'm an artist, I always tell people I see things as grids and I see numbers with everything. So I think that has a lot to do with both my parents. My father was very, very gifted in math. And tell it like it is, he also used to play numbers, which is funny. Maybe this explains my grids. So he used to write all his papers for his bookie very, very clean. Everything was in order. The numbers of what he wanted to play and the what he wanted to play them at. And I always saw math that way. So when he was able to explain to me math problems, I didn't know what a calculator really was. We bought one, and for a long time I couldn't calculate on a calculator. I calculated in my head, like I saw everything on paper. So both my parents had that gift. Where it spins more towards the right side of my brain is, like I said, my mother was an artist. So she made sure that a lot of things that I did were very creative. So both my parents made sure that I got to go to museums and the theater and those kind of things. Even though being an only child, I still had those opportunities. When I turned 9, the year my mother would have been 38 years old, she passed away. She passed away that winter before she was able to turn 38. And my father made sure after she passed that I was around a lot of women of influence. Now, that's not saying my father dated a lot, because he didn't. In fact, the 2 women that he dated over the course of the years weren't even really the influences in my lives. My friends' mothers were very, very involved in my life. So things that I needed as a young lady, they were able to articulate that information to me. I had a really great neighbor down the hall. My best friend's mother lived upstairs. I had another great neighbor that lived right next door to me. So if I ever was in need of any kind of information, even until my late teens, there was always female role models around me. So that being said, my father, who, like I said, he dated, he had a girlfriend. He didn't really date around. He was very clear that it was about he and I. He made sure that I learned everything as a young lady that I needed to know in terms of how a man should treat a woman, in terms of how I should be treated by people, the way that I look at things, the way that I shop, the way I handle my money. He was very, very clear about those things. He was not a strict man. He was a quiet man. And those of you who knew my father, you see him walking down the street, he looked a little serious. So a lot of times, people would be like, oh, Mr. Slade, he's cool, but he looks mean. He wasn't a mean man at all. Very quiet, what is it, gentle giants they call him? That's what he was. So I noticed, obviously, being raised by a male, my perspective of males are a lot different from the average woman. So I do tend to, as an adult, get very offended when people lump me in a category, assuming just because I'm female, I can't see a male perspective. I'm not a man and I don't profess to be a man, but I was raised by one. And the one thing that he put things in perspective that maybe a lot of women don't understand for whatever reason. The other side of it is, even though I was not raised by a woman, I am still a woman. So I have certain attributes that I expect as far as respect. So when I walk into, let's say, a business situation, I don't want people treating me a certain way because I'm a woman. I want them to treat me a certain way because of what I know and my level of expertise, not because, oh, she's a female. When I walk into obviously I'm a black female. There's certain things that I expect. My father never used me being black as a crutch. He didn't talk a whole lot. It wasn't like he didn't mention things that have gone on. For goodness sake, he came from the South. But he was very clear about what I need to know as an individual to float through this world. So there are things that I get very, very caught up in emotionally based on what I learned as a young lady. So fast forward into middle school, where, a lot of the girls were starting, we all were. Let's keep it clear. I always liked little boys since I was like 5. So we girls were very interested in boys, even if the boys weren't necessarily interested in us by middle school. But the one thing that I always felt as an individual, and maybe, I don't know if this is an artist thing or girl thing, it's just something that I've always experienced. There were girls that I hung out with that tend to get more attention from boys than I did. I was slightly a tomboy, but I still, my mother always made sure that I dressed like a young lady. But there was just something that was always off-putting, I guess, about me. Because I was just too quiet or too shy, or I don't know what it was. But I look at my pictures now, like, oh, I was a cute little girl. But when I was growing up, I didn't feel that way. So certain things would take place that I would kind of stay out of view. Because I feel like, well, Jane Doe has more attention from John Doe, who I have a crush on. So I'm going to just back up. I wasn't the girl to fight for it. I was like, if it was meant for it to be mine, or he was meant to be for me, then then he was meant to be for me. But I never fought over boys. I never fought. whatever I felt was mine, I took it. And if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. So I tend to not be difficult in situations, but rest assured, even now to this day, there are individuals in my young life that have crossed me, if you want to call it crossing me, or have done wrong to me, or however you want to word it, that I basically, I see them, I'm like, hey, how you doing? To this day, because I was taught to be polite. I'm the same way now. I do for people, and I want that same respect. But if you're too busy thinking too far ahead for your own benefit, and you're not thinking of the greater good of all, and I get caught in the crossfire of that choice you've made, rest assured that we'll be cordial, but we will not be cool. And I don't know of a lot of people over the years, they wonder, well, why is Trina not so, we used to be really tight. I'm talking about now in present years. As a kid, it doesn't matter anymore. In high school and college, that doesn't matter anymore. I'm talking about in adulthood, in business. If you've crossed me in business or personally or a family member, if you cross a family member or a really good friend, you will hear my mouth. If you cross me personally, you probably won't hear my mouth, but that's probably more dangerous than if you were, if that makes sense. And when I was little, it was the same way. There were people that I really thought were cool friends, and then they did something to me, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't, I might have cried about it for a little bit and let it go. As an adult, I don't even cry about it anymore. I just kind of say, okay, it's all good. And some of you follow me on social media and you read some of my posts, and I think one of the ones that have been coming up a lot lately where I giggle with friends is the one about if I'm quiet, if you cross me and you don't hear from me, or if I'm quiet, that's probably not a good thing. That's more dangerous than if I was to speak my piece. So for some, that's funny, because what they do is they observe and they're like, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of true. If you're not speaking, that's almost uncomfortable. Ugh. And that's, take it how you want to take it. But that's a trait that I learned from young. And it's comfortable for me. And I've had to learn, especially being an only child, of ways to soothe myself, to make myself be able to function through this world. And understand that if you are not an artist, you do not understand how artists function, I don't know if it's meant for you to be part of their artistic circle, if that makes sense. Some artists are very emotional. So it comes out in their work, whether they sing, dance, perform, paint, sculpt. And if you can't understand their full emotional strength, or you don't make an effort to try to understand, it's just about you instead about why they're producing what they're producing and how they're producing, then it's not meant for you to have their piece of work. It's not meant for you to go to see their work because you don't appreciate it. You don't respect it. And that's one of the things that I think that there's a disconnect. The public, the outside public, whether you are a municipality or a potential collector or just a common citizen on the street, if you do not understand, or at least try to understand what makes that artist tick, then you're not meant to be in their world. So I know this is short and sweet, but I want you to get a little bit of understanding of the Trina then and the Trina now, and maybe it'll relate to some of the artists that you have come in contact with and get a better understanding. So that's it for now. I'm going to chat up again later, at a later time, so you can get a full-fledged understanding of the artist. Talk to you all soon. Peace.